Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into a myth that almost no one tells at bedtime, but absolutely should. Imagine this. You're standing on a dusty path in a sun-soaked vineyard, where grapes droop heavy on the vine and the scent of fermenting juice wafts through the warm air. Somewhere nearby, cicadas click in the background like lazy castanets, and coming up that path, wearing leopard print robes, half-drunk and fully divine, is the god Dionysus. He's barefoot. He's singing. He may or may not be arguing with a pigeon. You've arrived just in time. Now, a quick reality check. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in Dionysus's version of a wine tasting. There are no spittoons, no moderation, just vine juice, chaotic flute music, and at least one satyr making questionable choices in the corner. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who else is winding down around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking with Dionysus now. The path is winding, all uneven stone and crushed grape skin. The sun is a golden haze behind you, and Dionysus is humming something vaguely off-key. Around his shoulders, a vine slithers like a lazy snake, curling around his arm to pluck a grape from the nearest bush. Yes, the vine does that now. He gave it permission last spring. Maybe he stops, turns to you, offers a handful of grapes. One sour, one sweet, and one that might be a date. Try one, he says with a grin, eyes glazed with divinity and last night's party. You pick the sweet one. Naturally, he nods approvingly. This is how it starts. Not with a battle or a lightning bolt, but a shared snack. Dionysus, for all his fame as the god of wine and revelry, is oddly gentle in his downtime. He likes watching mortals trip over themselves at weddings. He likes watching bees get drunk off fermented figs. He likes goats, especially that one goat Toffel, or something close to it that once kicked over a jar and started what would become the very first vineyard accident in history. But more on that later. You follow him deeper into the rows of vines, where amphorae sit in the shade, sweating like sunburned tourists. See, he says, waving a hand lazily at the greenery. It's not all orgies and madness. Sometimes it's just agriculture. That's when the thumping starts. It's not music. It's not thunder. It's hooves. One set, plodding, emphatic, and ever so slightly out of rhythm. Dionysus rolls his eyes. He found me again. The donkey enters. He's not majestic. He's not particularly clean, but he is loyal. Dionysus gave him a name, Thistle, but the donkey refuses to acknowledge it, just stares with those long-lashed eyes and lets out a bray that sounds like a trumpet stuck in molasses. The donkey is important, not because he's divine. He's very much not, but because he's the only creature who has never pretended Dionysus makes sense. He just carries him from village to village, braying at inconvenient moments and occasionally chewing on scrolls. Do you know, Dionysus says, swinging a leg over the donkey's back, that I once tried to swap him for a peacock. Worst trade attempt of my immortal life. He sighs, pats the donkey's mane, and you trudge on. Now, here's your historical fun fact for the evening. Some ancient Greek festivals actually featured parades where men dressed up as Dionysus rode donkeys through town while bystanders threw fennel stalks and stale bread. It wasn't dignified, but it was tradition. And as any historian will tell you, while squinting at a crumbling papyrus, rituals don't need to make sense. They just need to repeat. So you and Dionysus and the donkey make your way toward a crumbling stone amphitheater, where someone left half a flute and a broken goblet under a fig tree. The donkey tries to eat both. Stop that! Dionysus mutters, "You're already more famous than you should be." You sit beside him under the tree as the sun slides low. He talks, mostly to himself, about how mortals need wine but fear chaos, how theater was born from his parties, how he once turned a pirate into a dolphin just to prove a point. And then, quieter. Sometimes I wonder if I made too much wine, or not enough music. The donkey snorts, you laugh, just a little. Dionysus smiles, the kind of smile that drips with fermented wisdom and mild existential dread. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was a late addition to the Olympian pantheon or an imported god from even older, wilder cults. They can't agree on his origin, his real name, or why his rituals always involved masks and pine cones. But they all agree on one thing. He never fit the mold. The donkey brays again. All right, Dionysus says, rising and brushing fig dust off his robes. Let's go find some trouble. Or at least some olives. You follow him as the stars start to peek through a lavender sky. Somewhere ahead, a festival is setting up. Somewhere nearby, a satyr is definitely about to fall into a wine barrel. And somewhere down the road, a very silly bet is about to be made. But for now, it's just you, a god, and his opinionated donkey. And honestly, it's kind of nice. You're still walking. The sun's finally melted into the hills behind you, replaced by a lavender dusk that hums with insects and the occasional screech of a startled owl. Dionysus is ahead now, leading his donkey, who is absolutely not named Thistle. If the donkey's stubborn silence has anything to say about it toward a rocky clearing that smells suspiciously like overripe plums and something else, something faintly burnt, and then you see it. The scene before you looks like someone tried to host a dinner party using only vines, twine, goat skulls, and a questionable amount of floral wreaths. There's a fire, of course, and around it are amphorae tipped on their sides like they gave up halfway through a toast. Empty goblets litter the ground like broken promises. Something sticky crunches under your sandal. Welcome, Dionysus announces, to the invention of wine. You're skeptical, mostly because this place looks like the aftermath of a frat party held inside a greenhouse. But Dionysus beams, his eyes glinting like wine-dark seas. He lifts one of the amphorae, swishes it near your ear, and the scent that hits you is, well, bold, fermented, maybe sentient, first batch. He says proudly, made by accident, drank by mistake, changed everything. You sit, you sip. You regret it just slightly. Now, here's your mainstream historical fact. The ancient Greeks weren't the first to make wine, but they did turn it into a cultural pillar. Their symposia fancy drinking parties with a side of poetry were the place to share philosophy, politics, and extremely questionable jokes. Dionysus, in myth and memory, was the patron of these affairs. He didn't just want you to get tipsy, he wanted you to unravel. But it wasn't me, Dionysus mutters, sipping his own cup. Not really. It was the goat. You turn, the donkey blinks. Goat, you ask? Oh yes, Dionysus says. The goat tripped over a clay jar of crushed fruit someone forgot in the sun. The juice soaked into the soil. A few weeks later, bees got into it, then mortals, then someone fell in love with a cloud, and the rest is history. You're about to ask for clarification when the donkey lets out a very judgmental bray. No, not you. Dionysus sighs, waving him off. You're late to this party. The goat had character. And here's your fringe tidbit for the night. One theory among fringe classicists claims that early wine rituals were inspired by goat behavior. Specifically how goats would leap and dance after eating fermented fruit. This, some say, inspired the dithyrambs wild, ecstatic hymns to Dionysus performed with a kind of chaotic stomp dance energy. Others say that's ridiculous. Others don't get invited to symposiums anymore. You lie back, eyes watching the stars flicker to life. The fire crackles beside you. Somewhere, a flute strikes a note sharp, wobbly, but sincere. Dionysus leans in. Do you want to know why mortals need wine? You nod. It's because your brains are noisy, he says, always buzzing, always planning. Wine doesn't silence the noise, it just turns the volume down until you forget to be scared of yourself. The donkey snorts, loudly, except for him. Dionysus adds, he has nothing to be scared of. He's achieved true inner peace through complete apathy. You almost believe him. And then something rustles nearby. You sit up, slightly alarmed, but it's just a satyr half-man, half-goat, all party stumbling through the underbrush with a lyre strapped to his back and a fistful of olives he's clearly stolen. Dionysus raises his cup. You're late. Time is a suggestion, the satyr slurs. Dropping down beside the fire, I brought snacks. They are, in fact, not snacks. They are pine cones. No one corrects him. The night stretches on like a silk ribbon unraveling. You sip the second wine a little sweeter, a little less vinegary, maybe filtered through a sheep's tunic, best not to ask. Laughter flows. Songs rise and fall. One of the satyrs attempts to juggle figs and accidentally sets off a chain reaction involving a lyre, a sandal, and a deeply offended owl. And through it all, Dionysus watches, not with judgment, not with control, but with a kind of gleeful detachment, as if he knows this moment, this minor chaos, will echo louder than any polished monument ever could. Historians still argue, he says quietly, whether I was ever real, or if I'm just a collection of hungover dreams and grape-stained prayers. You don't know what to say, but the donkey brays again, long, loud, possibly philosophical. That, Dionysus says, raising his cup, was a better speech than Plato ever gave. You clink your goblet against his and drink to the absurd, and as you lie back, stars swirling, head slightly fuzzy from divine fermentation, you realize something. This isn't a story about gods, or goats, or even wine. It's about the moment just before the madness. When the fire is still warm, the goblet is still half full, and you're surrounded by people who won't remember what they said, but will always remember the way it felt. The donkey curls up beside the amphora. The satyr snores into a pile of wreaths. Dionysus hums a tune with no name, tapping a rhythm into the dirt with his heel. And you're still here, still breathing, still unsure how grape juice and goat dancing made civilization possible, but grateful they did. The sun hasn't returned yet, but the sky begins to pale just slightly, like the world is thinking about waking up but hasn't had its metaphorical coffee. Dionysus, however, is still wide awake. Immortality does strange things to your circadian rhythm. You're walking again, not far from the fire pit now full of ash, sandals, and a half-melted flute. You follow the god and his donkey through low hills toward music. Not the kind you fall asleep to, but the kind that keeps you hovering somewhere between sleep and waking pipes and drums. Voices calling out syllables that don't quite form words. It smells like honey and sweat and crushed time. A festival is setting up. Welcome, Dionysus murmurs, to the first wine celebration. There are no rules, except one. You raise an eyebrow. Don't ask the satyrs what's in the soup. Noted. This place isn't a city. Not exactly. It's more of an idea. Tents strung with fig leaves, amphorae lined up like parade floats, garlands hanging from olive branches. The people wear linen chitons with grape stains and mismatched sandals. Some have masks painted, feathered, or shaped like cats. No one seems to be in charge. That's because Dionysian festivals weren't organized, they were unleashed. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Dionysia, held in Athens, was one of the oldest festivals honoring Dionysus, eventually giving rise to formalized theater. People wore masks, performed plays, and paraded giant phalluses through the city, for sacred reasons. What began as chaotic revelry became the cornerstone of Western drama. Because of Dionysus, we have tragedy, and also comedy, and also too many college improv troupes. You walk through the crowd, where no one blinks at a god on a donkey. In fact, one woman offers Thistle, still refusing to acknowledge that name, a crown of myrtle leaves. The donkey eats it. Everyone cheers. There's something electric in the air, though nothing's plugged in. The music gets louder. A chorus of masked dancers enters from stage left, even though there is no stage, swaying and stomping and occasionally shouting nonsense about vines and frogs. Dionysus chuckles. None of them rehearsed. He tells you proudly, they're just feeling it. Somewhere behind you, a small child is painting a goat purple. You find yourself swept into a slow spiral of movement. No steps to follow, no beat to hit. People press goblets into your hand, offer figs, wave feathers near your face for no clear reason. The donkey walks directly through the dancing without a care in the world. He knows this isn't about him, but it's about something. This is where the god becomes blurry, because Dionysus isn't like the others. He doesn't sit on a throne or hurl lightning. He doesn't demand worship, he inspires it. Through rhythm, through frenzy, through wine-soaked moments when the world feels fuzzy at the edges and rules don't quite apply. You find yourself standing at the edge of a crude wooden platform, watching as a group of revelers stage what might be a play, or a ritual, or a deeply confusing version of both. One of them wears a donkey mask, one wears nothing but grapes. One, you're fairly certain, is asleep. The donkey beside you brays loudly. Everyone pauses. Then someone in the crowd yells, "The god's donkey speaks," and chaos erupts. Joyful, unrestrained, utterly uncoordinated chaos. They hoist the real donkey onto the platform. Dionysus just laughs and claps like a proud stage dad. Historians still argue, he leans over to whisper, whether these festivals were about ecstatic worship or just an excuse to act weird for 3 days. You watch as the donkey refuses to participate. He sits, he stares, he might be meditating, and suddenly, it all makes sense. This isn't a performance, it's a permission slip. To be absurd, to be unfiltered, to be very, very loud, and then very, very quiet. A girl next to you is painting her elbows with red wine. A man is balancing amphorae on his knees while humming to a pomegranate. No one is judging. Everyone is slightly sticky. Here's your fringe tidbit. Some believe the original Dionysian rites involved ritualized madness induced by not just wine, but music, sleep deprivation, and possibly mushrooms. Historians debate whether these festivals had roots in shamanic trances, and whether the god himself was once a figure of death and rebirth, rather than just chaotic fun. Either way, it involved masks, shouting, and the occasional misplaced goat. As the sky shifts toward full daylight, the crowd grows drowsy. Some lie down on woven mats. Others pass out in olive groves. A few wander off into the hills, giggling and mumbling fragments of odes. And Dionysus, he's carving something into the dirt with a fig branch. You peer closer. It's a crude drawing of a donkey and a man, side by side, singing. What is it? You ask. A warning, he says. Against what? Pride. The donkey farts. You both take that as a sign to move on. The celebration fades behind you as you head toward a quieter path. Dionysus is unusually silent. The donkey follows, munching on something that may have once been ceremonial. You feel it now, that gentle weight in your limbs, that softness in the chest. The way your thoughts float like grape leaves in a spring barrel. You're not drunk. Not exactly. Just deeply relaxed. This is what Dionysus wanted all along. Not worship, not temples, just this moment. You, the road, the story unfolding with no need to end yet. You walk in silence for a while, not the uncomfortable kind, but the dreamy, stretchy sort of silence that feels like a long exhale. Dionysus hums something tuneless. The donkey sways beside you, his hooves making a soft clop-clop against the path. You're not sure how long you've been walking or if time has started to mean less than it used to. Eventually, you reach a small olive grove where the air is thick with bees and the promise of naps. Dionysus flops down beneath a crooked tree and gestures for you to sit. The donkey lies down with a loud sigh, as if he's been doing all the work. Dionysus leans back against the tree trunk, fingers idly plucking at a vine that grows through the grass. Mortals, he says, don't understand madness. You raise an eyebrow. They fear it. He continues, lock it away, medicate it, explain it. But sometimes madness isn't a flaw. Sometimes it's a door. He pauses, as if waiting for the donkey to brace something philosophical again. Nothing. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In many early Greek plays, especially those dedicated to Dionysus, madness wasn't portrayed as evil. It was a divine visitation, something that stripped away illusion. Characters like Pentheus in the Bacchae suffer not just because of their arrogance, but because they tried to resist that ecstatic, wild truth Dionysus brings. You pick an olive from a low branch. It's still green, not quite ripe, bitter. If you bite it, you don't. Dionysus plucks another and tosses it at the donkey's head. A soft thunk. The donkey doesn't flinch. So I gave them visions, he says casually. Little dreams, little frenzies. Not the kind that hurt just enough to remind them they were alive. You nod slowly. And the vines? You ask? Oh, those were mostly for decoration. He grins, but also for strangling furniture when the party got boring. Here's your fringe tidbit. Some ancient writers believed Dionysus could animate vines not metaphorically, but literally. Stories tell of wine goblets that refilled themselves and ivy crawling up the legs of skeptics during his rites. Whether these were hallucinations or clever illusions, no one can say for sure, but the idea stuck. You lie back in the grass. The bees are buzzing a lullaby nearby. Someone's flute from far off carries through the trees, soft and meandering. You know, Dionysus says, voice low now, there were kings who tried to ban me. You glance over. Oh yes, one threw all my followers into prison. Another tried to chop down my sacred groves. There was even one who tried to punch a satyr in the face. It did not go well. You wait. And sure enough, here it comes. Historians still argue whether those stories are literal or symbolic. He shrugs. But I like to think they're warnings. You wonder, aloud. Warnings against what? He smiles at you over the rim of his goblet. Control. Just then, the donkey snorts awake and stares pointedly at a low-hanging branch of olives. You pluck a few and drop them in front of him. He sniffs, eats two, spits out the third. Judgmental little beast. A breeze moves through the grove, warm and dry and thick with the scent of thyme. You watch it stir Dionysus's hair, rustle the trees, ripple through the grass like some lazy god stretching his limbs. Dionysus picks a blade of grass and twirls it between his fingers. Did I ever tell you about the time I turned a ship into grapevines? You shake your head, half smiling. Well, he begins. There was this band of pirates who thought I was just a lost noble. They tied me to the mast, planned to sell me, but I just waited, patiently. And then the oars turned to serpents, the sails filled with ivy. The deck he pats the earth for emphasis became wild and blooming. And the pirates, they leapt overboard in panic. He pauses. I turn them into dolphins. You blink. Why dolphins? They always look like they're laughing at a joke you didn't hear. He shrugs. Fitting punishment. You sit in that story for a while. The breeze, the flute, the hum of insects. You let it all sink in like honey in warm tea. And somewhere between reality and myth, between the olives and the oaths of forgotten kings, you begin to understand Dionysus isn't chaos for chaos's sake. He's the release valve, the sacred nonsense, the poetry that makes the pressure bearable. He is, in short, the god of exhale. The donkey rises, stretches, wanders over to nibble at the edge of Dionysus's robe. Time to go, the god asks softly. The donkey brays once short, low, affirmative. Dionysus stands, brushes grass from his tunic, and holds out a hand to you. You take it, and once again, you're walking. Toward what? You don't know yet. But there's something in Dionysus's smile, something impish, something inevitable that makes you think the next stop will be even stranger. You pass the edge of the grove and step into sunlight, filtered through vines so thick they might be listening. You follow the sound of laughter and hooves. The road narrows. It's less of a road now and more of a goat trail, winding between ancient stones and whispering cypress trees. The air feels thicker here, warmer, like the land itself has been drinking. You're not entirely sure where you are anymore. You stopped asking a while ago. Time with Dionysus doesn't flow, it sloshes. He walks ahead, arms swinging, tunic loose, laurel crown askew. The donkey follows dutifully behind, chewing a mouthful of who knows what, and occasionally swatting flies with his tail. The three of you are a strange caravan, a god, a mortal, and a braying beast that smells faintly of figs and disapproval. Then, from around the bend music, not flute music, this time, no lilting pan pipes or wine-sloshed choruses. This is something sharper, twangy, astringent. It has rhythm, but no warmth. It makes your spine straighten for reasons you can't explain. You come to a clearing where several satyrs are gathered in a loose circle. One is attempting to balance on a barrel, one is spinning in circles, and one standing tall on a log is cradling a donkey. Not just any donkey. The donkey, Dionysus's donkey, still unnamed by his own stubborn choice. And that's when it happens. The braying, loud, nasal, bizarrely on pitch. The crowd erupts in cheers. Dionysus freezes, slowly lowers his wine cup, squints. Is that my donkey singing? The satyrs cheer again. Someone shouts, encore. Another waves a fennel stalk like a conductor's baton. A small chorus of woodland creatures seems to join in owls, cicadas, frogs, all out of sync, all very enthusiastic. You glance at Dionysus. He looks Insulted, the donkey finishes his performance with a long, honking finale bray that echoes off the hills like a broken trumpet in a marble hallway. Dionysus folds his arms. He's stealing my crowd. You stifle a laugh. Poorly. And here comes your mainstream historical fact. In ancient comedic plays, especially those performed during the Dionysia, animals were often personified or used as symbols of foolishness, wisdom, or surprise reversal. The donkey, lowly as it was, often became the punchline or the unexpected sage. It wasn't about the animal. It was about the absurdity of letting go of order, letting chaos win. Oh, I see what this is. Dionysus mutters, pacing now. This is that every mortal gets one day to be king thing, isn't it? You blink, the donkey isn't mortal. Exactly, he snaps, then pauses. Wait, he watches the crowd fawn over the donkey. One satyr is braiding a flower crown. Another is composing an ode that rhymes bray with yay. Someone offers the donkey a handful of raisins. The donkey declines. Dionysus steps forward, clearing his throat. The satyrs fall silent. He announces, am the god of wine, madness, joy, and interpretive dance, not the donkey. Silence. Then someone shouts, prove it. You groan. Dionysus's eyes narrow. He steps up onto the same log, clears his throat, and launches into a song so haunting, so bizarre, so half yodel and half sob that you immediately regret having ears. It's emotional. It's vaguely operatic. It's definitely about grapes. But is it good? You look at the donkey. The donkey looks back. And then, without warning, the donkey responds. A single, elongated bray, perfectly timed, perfectly pitched. It cuts through the grove like a blade made of pure sass. The satyrs lose it. They collapse in laughter. One falls off the barrel. Another spits wine through his nose. Someone drops a tambourine. And Dionysus, he blinks, stares, and in the most dramatic display of wounded pride ever attempted by a god, he sits down, grabs his own wine cup, and mutters, I just got roasted by my own donkey. You pat his shoulder. The donkey trots in a wide circle, bowing with exaggerated flair. He even kicks a pine cone for emphasis. Dionysus watches, face in hands. Historians still argue, you offer gently, whether donkeys were ever sacred animals in ancient Greek religion. He snorts. They are now. Here's your fringe tidbit. In some obscure Hellenistic texts, donkeys appear as symbols of humility and resistance to divine vanity. One half-buried scroll even refers to the bray that silenced Apollo. Scholars believe it was satire or possibly a very bitter playwright who hated liars. The crowd slowly disperses, giggling and whispering about the great musical duel. Someone sketches a crude image of Dionysus and the donkey back to back. Microphones or maybe ladles. In hand, Dionysus remains on his log, defeated, or maybe just deeply, deeply confused. Eventually, he stands, dusts off his robe, looks skyward with theatrical gravitas. I am going to need an entire amphora and a nap. He turns to you, and maybe a revenge plan. The donkey brays again, casually, like a punctuation mark. You all head back down the trail, one god, one mortal, and one newly anointed bray champion. The sun climbs higher. The cicadas sing back up. Somewhere behind you, a satyr begins composing a ballad called Ode to the Ears That Endured. You try not to smile, but you do, because somehow, against all odds, this ridiculous little tale is starting to feel legendary. The sun is high now, resting like a lazy bronze coin on the edge of the sky. The air smells of wild thyme, fig trees, and a god's slightly bruised ego. Dionysus trudges ahead, not storming, not pouting, just walking like a man, god who's just been publicly outbrayed by his own pack animal. You and the donkey trail a few steps behind. He walks with the smug sway of someone who knows exactly what he did. Every so often, he lets out a little snort just enough to be audible, just enough to remind everyone who won. Dionysus mutters something that sounds like overgrown mule with vocal training. Eventually, the path forks. To the left, a vineyard. To the right, a mossy clearing filled with what can only be described as activity. Dancers, drums, painted faces, and a suspicious number of masks shaped like mushrooms. Dionysus veers right. We're going to get weird. he announces, and possibly ceremonial. You follow, because by now, why not? The clearing is surrounded by tall trees, branches woven together into a sort of natural canopy. It hums with energy, not the sharp, tense kind, but something drowsier, dreamlike. People move in slow spirals, arms raised, eyes closed. Some wear ivy crowns. Some wear nothing but ash and honey. And in the center, a low stone altar, covered in vines. Dionysus claps his hands. Right, everyone. Let's make this performance slightly less embarrassing than the last one. Shall we? A goat bleats in reply. You decide not to interpret that. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Dionysian rituals, especially those of the Bacchae, often took place in secluded wooded areas. These ceremonies involved dance, chanting, and trance-like states. Some scholars believe they served as psychological release valves for ancient Greeks, especially women, who found in Dionysus a sanctioned space to defy societal norms. The dancers begin again, moving with the rhythm of a drumbeat that seems to rise from the earth itself. The satyrs arrive too, flutes slung over their shoulders, expressions already half drunk. One is painting eyes on his knees. Another is whispering sweet nothings to a pomegranate. And then it happens. From the trees emerge a group of women clad in furs, vines, and the occasional painted symbol, the Maenads, Dionysus's fiercest and most devoted followers. They do not walk. They glide. They do not speak. They hiss, hum, laugh softly, like they know secrets you've never been brave enough to ask about. Dionysus grins. Showtime. The Maenads begin to dance around the altar, movements fluid and wild. They leap, they twirl, they chant words that sound like poetry filtered through a thunderstorm. One carries a thyrsus, a tall staff tipped with ivy and a pine cone, sacred symbol of Dionysus. The donkey, unimpressed, starts grazing in the corner. You glance at Dionysus. His eyes are distant now, not wounded but transfixed. This, he whispers, is how we remember. Remember what? That we're animals before we're gods. That we bleed and break and howl under the moon. And it's not shameful. It's sacred. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some fringe historians argue that Dionysian rites were not just theater or therapy, but surviving fragments of older shamanic practices from the East. They point to similarities with Thracian and Anatolian rituals involving masks, wine, ecstatic dance, and even bee symbolism. Mainstream scholars roll their eyes. The fringe historians just pour more wine. The Maenads form a circle now. One of them places a fig on the altar. Another smears wine over her own cheeks. A third whispers into the thyrsus like it's a microphone to the divine. Then, unexpectedly, they beckon the donkey. He lifts his head. Choose. They beckon again, and with a snort that sounds suspiciously like resignation, the donkey walks slowly, ceremoniously into the center of the ritual. The Maenads part for him. He stands there, awkward but oddly dignified. They wrap a vine around his neck, press a fig to his lips. He accepts, slowly, with grace. Dionysus stares. Okay, he murmurs. I did not choreograph this. You lean closer. Do they think he's sacred now? Dionysus shrugs. I'm not sure, but I am deeply uncomfortable. Someone begins chanting. Others join. A low, droning sound that grows and trembles and somehow loops back into itself like a circle of sound. The donkey doesn't move. Neither do you, because something strange is happening. Not magical, not flashy, but intimate, sacred, silly and serious, ridiculous and reverent. All at once, you begin to understand why ancient rituals didn't always distinguish between ceremony and farce. Because maybe they aren't so different. Historians still argue, Dionysus says under his breath, whether this kind of thing ever actually happened, whether the rites were really this wild, or whether it's all exaggerated by old men with ink-stained robes and too much time. He exhales. But I was there, and let me tell you, most of the time, we just made it up as we went. The chant fades. The Maenads slowly disperse. One places a wreath around the donkey's neck. Another hands Dionysus a handful of painted pebbles, bows, and vanishes into the trees. No applause. just the hush of a ceremony completed. The donkey walks back to you, vine trailing behind him like a sash, and you think maybe, just maybe, this absurd animal really did become sacred. If only for a moment. Dionysus claps once, startling the birds. Well, that was unexpected. He says brightly, "Who's hungry?" There's a rule in Dionysian wanderings, one not etched in stone or whispered by oracles, but known instinctively to anyone who's spent more than 3 hours in his company. After every strange ritual, there must be snacks, and so you walk again, deeper into a sun-dappled grove that smells like crushed herbs and the fading memory of bonfires. The donkey leads now crowned in vines, belly full of figs, and brimming with an unsettling confidence for someone who was just worshipped by forest-dwelling performance artists. Dionysus follows with a theatrical sigh, arms swinging and sandals flopping. "We've earned a break," he says, preferably one involving cheese. Soon, you come upon a glade where a satyr has spread out a makeshift feast on a large flat stone. Grapes, olives, honey cakes, wheels of cheese that look mildly suspicious, and a pitcher of wine that glows slightly in the sun. A half-finished poem lies beside a bowl of walnuts. The title, Ode to Braying Glory. "Don't look at that," Dionysus mutters. "They're just rubbing it in." You settle beside him. The donkey settles in, too, munching loudly on an entire melon rind. As you eat, Dionysus tells you about a satyr named Euphemius, who once tried to court a dryad using nothing but flute solos and foot juggling. It did not end romantically, but it did cause a minor landslide. "Mortals think we gods are jealous creatures," he says, licking honey off his fingers. But honestly, it's not jealousy. It's theater. You raise an eyebrow, we feel things loudly. He explains, so that you can whisper yours. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek drama, especially comedies and tragedies, performed during Dionysian festivals, wasn't just for fun, it was sacred. The theater was considered a space of catharsis, a ritual release through collective experience. Through laughter and weeping, the audience was meant to purge emotion. Dionysus didn't just inspire the stage. He was the stage. You sip from a goblet. It tastes like summer and headaches. Nearby, a satyr tunes a pan flute. Another is trying to balance grapes on a tortoise. There is no clear goal. No one seems to mind. Then something catches your eye. A sandal, just one, stuck in a nearby bush. "Ah," Dionysus says, mouth full of cheese. That brings back memories. He tells you how he once lost both sandals during a night of revelry and had to walk barefoot across Mount Helicon with a goat named Melvin as his guide. At some point, they invented a dance routine. At another point, they accidentally declared a tree king. No one remembers how that ended. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some cults of Dionysus practice ritual undressing, where followers would lose or discard articles of clothing as a symbol of casting off identity and ego. Others suggest it was just hot, and ancient tunics weren't known for their secure straps. Dionysus leans back, hands behind his head, looking absurdly at peace. "Do you know why I love satyrs?" You glance toward the one now attempting to paint a chicken purple. "No shame," he says. "They exist exactly as they are. Hungry, musical, occasionally naked, always honest. You consider this. You look at the donkey, who is now lying on his side in the grass, basking like a divine lizard. Do you think he's honest? You ask. Dionysus narrows his eyes. He is the most brutally honest creature I've ever met. As if on cue, the donkey lets out a long, rumbling bray that sounds vaguely like someone saying, "Meh." The satyrs cheer. One begins dancing in circles. Another falls asleep with a grape in his ear. You lie back on the grass. The sky above is impossibly blue, with clouds like stretched wool drifting across the sun. The ground beneath you is warm and slightly sticky, and you don't even care. Dionysus hums a tune you don't recognize. It's from an old play, he says, noticing your glance. Written once, performed twice, and then eaten by a goat. You laugh. He doesn't. I'm serious. The donkey lifts his head just enough to chew on a nearby reed and then flops back down. There's a pause, a long one. the kind that happens when everyone is full. The sun is gentle, and the air feels thick with stillness. Dionysus speaks again, softer now. Historians still argue whether the things we did were real, whether we danced or dreamed, or hallucinated our own ceremonies, whether it was sacred or just chaos. He turns to you, but I say this, if you can't tell the difference, maybe that's the point. You nod. He grins. Somewhere, someone tries to juggle cheese wheels. It goes poorly. And for the first time in what feels like centuries, Dionysus does not immediately turn it into a metaphor. You rest your head in the crook of your arm, feeling the earth beneath you breathe. Somewhere nearby, the donkey snores. The donkey's snoring eventually stops. Not because he wakes up, he just shifts to a new position, tongue lolling, one leg twitching as if chasing something in his dreams. Maybe glory, maybe grapes, maybe both. Dionysus rises with a theatrical grunt, brushing olive leaves from his robes. Enough loafing, he declares, though he says it in a tone that suggests he would very much like to loaf some more. We've got reputations to damage. You stretch, somewhere in your back. A gentle crunch reminds you that lying on the ground for several hours isn't exactly endorsed by modern chiropractors. Still, you feel strangely refreshed, like your brain has had a good laugh and a light nap, without committing fully to either. Dionysus leads the way, vine-wrapped thyrsus slung across his shoulder like a hiker's walking stick. I've decided, he says, not waiting for your opinion, that I need to reclaim my musical dignity. You glance at the donkey, who is now awake and looking distinctly unimpressed. I'm going to challenge him, Dionysus says, to a rematch. Oh no, and now, dear listener, you find yourself walking straight into the heart of what might be the pettiest divine rivalry in Greek history. You arrive at a glade shaped like a natural amphitheater, stone ridges and mossy ledges forming a quiet stage. Birdsong echoes in a way that feels suspiciously theatrical. Even the frogs stop ribbiting. Dionysus steps into the center. Ladies, satyrs, and judgmental woodland birds, he announces, welcome to the duel of the donkey. Part 2. Several satyrs tumbles in from the bushes, clearly still chewing. One holds a lyre, another is holding an instrument that looks suspiciously like two gourds tied together with string. The donkey takes his place across from Dionysus. Tail swishing, you sit on a boulder, equal parts amused and afraid. Dionysus taps the ground with his staff. We'll keep it civil this time. No sacred vines, no hallucinated backup singers, just music. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greece, musical contests were not only real, they were sacred. In Delphi, performers competed in singing hymns to Apollo. In Sparta, musical training was part of education. Even Homer's epics refer to bards competing for honor, and yes, wine. Competitions were both entertainment and ritual. Dionysus begins. He hums first, a deep, throaty sound that blooms outward, vibrating the leaves. He lifts a flute and begins to play not skillfully, not exactly, but with conviction. It's emotional, raw. Every note sounds like it's been through something. Then he sings, it's a song about grapes and loneliness and accidentally inventing theater while trying to impress a shepherdess. You kind of love it. The satyrs nod solemnly. And then the donkey opens his mouth. The bray is long, unapologetic. Somehow, it mimics the melody Dionysus just performed. There's even a warble. It ends in a triumphant snort, and the crowd erupts. A satyr sobs into a fig leaf. One claps so hard he dislocates something. Even a turtle at the edge of the glade lifts its head, clearly moved. Dionysus lowers his flute. You've got to be kidding me. The donkey flicks an ear. Someone declares a clear winner. Here's your fringe tidbit. In one surviving comedic fragment by a little-known Greek playwright named Phrynichides, there's a scene where an animal, or perhaps a man in a donkey suit, wins a music contest by sheer surprise and enthusiasm. Scholars debate whether it was parody of parody, or a deeply passive-aggressive jab at the judging system of the time. Dionysus bows deeply. Very well, I admit defeat. Again, may your hooves always find rhythm. Noble Braylord. The donkey blinks. Then, he walks up and gently nudges Dionysus with his snout, a gesture of peace. or perhaps mercy. Dionysus smiles, and it's real this time, not performative, not wounded, just amused. "You've got spirit," he tells him, and a terrible breath. The satyrs begin a celebratory circle dance. It's more of a stumble, really, but the energy is there. One trips over his own flute. Another starts chanting, Don Key, until a bird dive bombs him and he switches to whispering it respectfully. You sit back, taking it all in. This absurd god, this smug donkey, this world that doesn't ask to make sense, only to be enjoyed. Dionysus flops down beside you, sweaty and mildly grass-stained. He watches the donkey bask in the praise. "You know," he says, "it's good to be humbled once in a while. Keeps the godhood from going stale." You look at him. "Do you actually feel humbled?" "Absolutely not." He grins. "But I'm willing to act like it for dramatic effect." The donkey lets out a final bray, short, decisive, almost like a mic drop. And the satyrs, exhausted from praise and fermented snacks, begin collapsing one by one into giggling heaps. You lie back in the grass again. This isn't history. Exactly. It's memory filtered through laughter. And somehow, it's starting to feel like home. You don't expect the donkey to win again, not twice. But here he is backlit by the dappled sunlight, like some shaggy, braying muse, surrounded by fans and fig-stained flutes, basking in the sheer absurdity of having bested a literal god. Again, Dionysus sits next to you on the grass, one leg folded under the other, chewing thoughtfully on a fennel stalk like it's a cigar of contemplation. "I blame the acoustics," he mutters. "Too much moss. The wind was wrong. Bad tempo from the frogs. The frogs croak in distant protest." You almost feel bad for him almost. Because, let's face it, this is a defining moment in mythological embarrassment. The god of wine, theater, and ecstatic revelation, defeated by a beast known primarily for transporting cabbages. Do you think he knows he won? You ask. Dionysus snorts. Oh, he knows. He's just too humble to gloat. You both look over. The donkey is getting a massage from a satyr using olive oil. Okay, maybe not humble. Dionysus sighs. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In many Greek myths, donkeys appear not just as comic relief, but as quiet symbols of resistance. In the tale of Silenus, Dionysus's old tutor, it's often a donkey that carries the drunken sage home after yet another lost evening. In short, donkeys endure. They show up. They don't need laurels. They just bray and move on. Which, of course, makes it worse. Because Dionysus thrives on pageantry, drama, divine tension. And here stands or lies a creature who wins without even trying. A donkey who, with one indignant bray and a stubborn stroll through a flute recital, now lives in the minds of satyrs and mortals alike as the voice of the vine. He's going to end up in a play, isn't he? Dionysus grumbles. He already has. One of the younger satyrs is scribbling furiously into a clay tablet with a twig dipped in grape juice. You catch a glimpse of the title, The Tragedy of a God, slighted by his steed. Oh no, Dionysus groans. They've made me the antagonist. You try not to laugh, but he sees it. Betrayal, he declares, pointing at you. Betrayed by mortals and beasts alike. The donkey lets out a short, proud grunt. A grape rolls toward him. He eats it. A small group of followers bows low, whispering about the bray heard round the mountains. Dionysus gets to his feet. Right, if that's how it is, fine. You brace yourself. He climbs atop an overturned amphora slip slightly, regains his balance and throws his arms wide. Let the donkey be king. The crowd of satyrs and maenads cheers, partly in jest, mostly in delight. A wreath is hastily woven and placed upon the donkey's head. He promptly eats it. This, Dionysus says dramatically, is the new world order. And here's your fringe tidbit. In one fragmentary parody from a 4th century BCE comedic poet, an animal, possibly a donkey, is temporarily made ruler of a Dionysian procession after winning a mock debate. Scholars still argue whether this was social satire, religious parody, or a very elaborate hangover joke. Back on the ground, Dionysus sighs and flops down once more, this time with both arms flung dramatically overhead. You know, he says, this all started because I made a bet. You lean in. I bet a satyr that I could outsing my donkey. Just once. Just for fun. And now I've created a legend. He stares up at the branches overhead. My myths used to involve wild women tearing kings apart with their bare hands. Now I'm losing to a quadruped with performance anxiety. You tilt your head. He doesn't look anxious. He used to be. Dionysus grumbles. Back when he couldn't keep time with the lyre. You watch the donkey bask in the glow of celebratory panpipe music. A satyr fans him with a fig leaf. Another is painting what looks like his profile onto a goat. You sigh. Is this what myths are supposed to be? Dionysus thinks for a long moment. Then, softly, sometimes myths are just the stories we tell when the gods are too tired to be serious. The air is warm. The light shifts golden. And then, without warning, Dionysus smiles again. Not the hurt smile from earlier. A real one. Let them laugh, he says. Let them sing bray ballads and crown fruit eaters. Let the world be absurd for a day. He nudges you. Besides, I've got a plan. Uh-oh. I'm going to make him famous. You blink. More famous. Oh, yes, he says, eyes twinkling. We're talking statues, processions, constellations. He points to the sky. See that? Empty real estate. Plenty of room for a donkey-shaped star cluster. And for the first time since the musical defeat, Dionysus looks pleased. Let the donkey have the victory. I'll give him the heavens. You lie back beside him, staring up at the slowly deepening sky. The stars haven't emerged yet, but it's easy to imagine one blinking on, shaped like a stubborn snout and two very long ears. Mythology, after all, doesn't require dignity. Just a good story, and maybe a bray that echoes forever. You wake, or maybe you were never fully asleep to the sound of Dionysus muttering to himself. He's pacing again, not dramatically, not angrily, just with a distracted sort of energy, like he's solving a riddle with his feet. The donkey is still asleep, curled up like a loaf of bread, wearing, somehow, a new crown of rosemary. The satyrs are scattered around the grove like half-deflated parade floats. One is snoring into a basket of figs. Another appears to be whispering to a log. Dionysus stops. I've decided, he says to no one in particular. I'm going into a barrel. You blink. A barrel. He nods, eyes alight with the kind of clarity only found in divine revelations and extremely strong wine. A large one. Sealed at the top, filled to the brim. I shall live inside it for a week and contemplate the meaning of taste. You stare at him. I'm reclaiming my artistic integrity, he adds, as if that explains everything. And thus begins what can only be described as one of the more misguided redemption arcs in divine history. Within hours, Dionysus has summoned a half-dozen followers to construct his retreat, an oversized wine barrel made from cedar planks and reinforced with grapevine twine. The satyrs argue over measurements. One tries to sand the interior using a hedgehog. Do not knock the process. Dionysus warns, swirling a goblet. This is how art is made. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek philosophers, most notably Diogenes, did in fact live in large ceramic containers often translated as barrels or jars. While Diogenes chose his barrel as a rejection of luxury, Dionysus, well, let's just say his intentions seem more fermented than philosophical. You help him climb inside. He insists on bringing a lyre, a jug of honey wine, and a scroll labeled Rough Draft, Ode to the One Who Brayed. Once the lid is sealed with air holes, of course Dionysus announces, do not disturb me unless the donkey releases a new album. Then silence. You sit nearby, unsure whether to guard the barrel or pretend this isn't happening. The donkey walks over, sniffs the barrel. Brays once. It echoes off the wood like a smug drumbeat. Inside, you hear Dionysus groan. And here's your fringe tidbit. A marginal papyrus fragment discovered in the 19th century suggests that in one version of the Dionysian myth cycle, the god spent 7 days inside a wine vat as a penance for hubris. Scholars argue whether this was symbolic or just extremely literal religious satire. Either way, the image stuck. By day 2, Dionysus is composing loud monologues from inside the barrel. This is my chrysalis. He announces, I shall emerge a butterfly, or a very opinionated raisin. By day 3, he's demanding snacks via a pulley system made from laurel branches. By day 4, the satyrs begin selling tickets. Come hear the god complain about musical injustice, shouts one. Only 2 olives per visit. The donkey lies in the shade, completely uninterested. Occasionally he brays at particularly dramatic passages. By day 5, Dionysus seems different, calmer, quieter. Do you know what it's like, he says through the barrel slats, to be immortal and still lose to something with hooves and a sneeze that sounds like a trumpet? You pause. Probably not. He sighs. But do you know what's worse? You shake your head, though he can't see it. It's realizing it wasn't a loss. It was a lesson. You sit by the barrel as the wind moves through the olive trees. The donkey blinks at you. A satyr offers you a handful of pistachios and a shrug. He's been writing, the satyr whispers, like a lot. Eventually, Dionysus asks to be let out. You lift the lid. He emerges like a tipsy prophet, hair full of cedar shavings and eyes gleaming with the manic focus of someone who's spent too long talking to their own echo. He holds out a scroll. The title, he declares, is Elegy for a Bray. You nod solemnly. Sounds heartfelt. It's terrible. He grins, but cathartic. And here's the thing. He seems lighter, not drunker, just freer. He looks at the donkey still lounging, still uninterested, and raises his goblet in salute. No more rivalry, he says, only reverence. The donkey blinks, then brays, then slowly turns away and relieves himself on a bush. Dionysus laughs so hard he nearly falls back into the barrel. Fine, he says, maybe just a little rivalry. And you walk again, away from the barrel, toward something new, or maybe just toward more nonsense. With Dionysus, there isn't really a difference. You've learned by now, wherever Dionysus walks, the landscape bends a little. Not literally, no cracking mountains or divine earthquakes, but the air shifts. Paths curve where they didn't before. Trees seem to lean in, listening. And time loses interest in being linear. The barrel is behind you now, left under the care of a very dedicated satyr who claims it sings lullabies at night. Dionysus strides ahead, arms swinging like a man with a mission and nothing at all to prove anymore, which, of course, means he's planning something. The donkey follows with his usual unbothered sway, dragging a vine he found somewhere. It has become his security blanket, parade banner, and occasional snack. So, Dionysus says over his shoulder, "You ever seen vines move?" You hesitate. He doesn't wait for an answer. You crest a low hill and suddenly, the world tilts. Below you lies a valley unlike any you've seen. It's covered in vines, not neat vineyard rows, but wild, tangled serpents of green winding over stones, curling through branches, dipping into shallow streams, and moving, gently, almost breathing. They're old, Dionysus says softly, too old for myths. They remember before. Before what? You almost ask, but the vines shift as if in warning. Down in the valley, clusters of grapes glisten with dew, though the sun is high. Birds hover just above the canopy, never landing. Something about this place vibrates with quiet power. These are my favorites, he whispers. They grow where they want, make wine that tastes like thunder and memory. And sometimes, they listen. He steps down into the valley. You follow. The vines part for him, for you. Not dramatically, no magical golden light, no musical swell, just a subtle, respectful shift. Like walking through a crowd that knows who you are. The donkey does not wait for permission. He wades into the vines and immediately begins chewing on one. Of course, Dionysus mutters, he's their king now. And here's your mainstream historical fact. The Greeks believed in sacred groves, places where gods were particularly present, and where behavior had to be respectful. Dionysus's sacred spots were often overgrown, wild, outside city limits. Wine, madness, and nature were intimately linked, always threatening to grow past what could be contained. At the center of the valley sits a stone circle ancient, cracked, half swallowed by ivy. Dionysus settles onto one of the stones, like he's done this 1,000 times. I used to hold gatherings here, he says, before cities, before scripts and tragedies and wine with labels. He gestures to the vines. They'd sing back then. If the offerings were good, if the company was right, you listen. But here only breeze and bees. He shrugs. Maybe they're waiting for something. You. That's when the goblets appear. Not carried, not summoned, just there. nestled in the moss, gleaming like forgotten memories, each one different. One carved from agate, one painted with tiny donkeys in procession, one made entirely from coiled vine. You reach for one, it's warm in your hand, humming faintly. And here's your fringe tidbit. In certain Orphic traditions, Dionysus wasn't just the god of wine. He was a symbol of rebirth and immortality. Drinking wine in sacred ritual wasn't mere pleasure. It was a way to partake in the cycle of death and return. A sip could be a prayer, a passage, a promise. Dionysus lifts his goblet to memory, he says, to madness, to donkeys with better breath control. Then gods, you clink, you sip. The wine tastes strange, not bad, just big, like trying to drink a thunderstorm or a lullaby you only half remember. It tingles at the back of your teeth. The vines shift again. Only this time, they move toward Dionysus. They curl gently around his ankles, up his arms, across his shoulders. He does not resist. Instead, he begins to hum, low, rhythmic, wordless, and the vines sway in time. You feel it, to a gentle pulsing underfoot, as if the entire valley is breathing with him. The donkey lifts his head, ears twitching. Then, for a moment, you hear it. Not a song, not exactly, but a presence, a tone, a feeling, like the world leaning closer. And just as quickly it's gone. Dionysus exhales. Well, he says, that was intimate. He stands, the vines releasing him like old friends parting at the end of a good dinner. I think they forgive me, he says. For what? For forgetting. He pats the nearest vine, which wiggles slightly in response. Wine isn't about winning, he says. It's about remembering the way we forgot how to be still. He starts walking again, out of the valley. The vines part once more. The donkey follows. So do you. Behind you, the valley closes, not ominously, just gently, like it's tucking itself back in, waiting for the next visitor who forgets what they came for. And as you walk, you realize the comeback wasn't for the crowds, it was for the roots. You climb out of the valley slowly, your legs heavy from wine, from silence, from something you don't quite have a name for. Dionysus moves ahead at a wandering pace, arms swinging, humming a little tune that may or may not be composed entirely of the word bray. The donkey ambles beside you. You glance at him. He glances back. There's understanding there now. Not eye-to-eye empathy, exactly, but something adjacent. The kind of quiet acknowledgement only possible between creatures who have just survived a musical duel, a vineyard that hums, and a god's personal wine barrel breakdown. At the top of the ridge, you pause. The sea is visible now, sparkling far in the distance, just a sliver of silver blue, where the land exhales into salt and myth. Dionysus shades his eyes. Not going there, he says immediately. Last time I did, someone challenged me to a grape-eating contest, and I blacked out in a ship's pantries. You walk along the ridge instead, through low pines and breeze-kissed brush. In the distance, the unmistakable shape of Mount Olympus cuts into the clouds. Dionysus says, rolling his eyes, that place again. He sighs like someone who's about to visit family members who talk politics at the table and mispronounce his name on purpose. Guess it's time. You blink. You're going back. He nods. I owe them an explanation. You raise an eyebrow. Okay, maybe not us, but they're going to hear one either way. He waves you forward. And soon, you're climbing. It's not the dramatic, thunderous ascent poets like to describe. No lightning bolts or eagle escorts. Just a winding path cut through scrub and marble, worn down by generations of sandals and expectations. You reach the lower halls of Olympus. It looks administrative. Columns, courtyards, eternal breezes, a lot of very shiny sandals. The other gods are already gathered in a stone amphitheater that doubles as both divine council chamber and passive-aggressive performance space. Zeus lounges on a throne of storm clouds, one eyebrow raised. Hera fans herself with a peacock feather. Apollo tunes a lyre with visible smugness. Ares is arm-wrestling a statue. And then there's Dionysus, in his traveling robe, donkey behind him, fig leaf still stuck to his shoulder. Ladies, he says, sweeping into the amphitheater with the flourish of someone who's been rehearsing this moment since breakfast. Gentlemen, entities. A hush falls over the crowd. Dionysus clears his throat. I know what you've heard. A pause. The donkey beat me. A longer pause. And yes, he continues. It's true. Gasps. Apollo chokes slightly on his own confidence. But Dionysus adds, stepping forward, what you haven't heard is that it was the best thing to happen to me in centuries. A murmur. He lifts a goblet empty, but raised with intent. This donkey, he says, gesturing behind him, did what no mortal, god, or satyr has done in eons. He humbled me. The donkey brays, loud, echoing, perfectly timed, and in that humbling, Dionysus continues, I rediscovered the root of it all. The wine, the madness, the joy, the sweet, unfiltered foolishness of being alive. Zeus crosses his arms. Hera raises an eyebrow. Athena leans forward. Intrigued, I've brought back more than a new Bray-based ballad. Dionysus says, I've brought perspective, a reminder that laughter is sacred, that absurdity is ritual, that sometimes the wisest thing in the room has hooves. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Dionysus was once a disputed Olympian. Some myths claim he took Hestia's seat. Others suggest his inclusion caused friction. He was, in many ways, the outsider, wild, foreign, unpredictable, but he earned his place not through battle, but through transformation of people, of cities, of self. The amphitheater is quiet now, and then clapping, slow at first, then rhythmic. Aphrodite joins in. Hermes smirks. Even Ares gives a small nod, muttering something about good footwork for a guy in a robe. Zeus stands. Fine, he says. You can stay. Wasn't asking. Dionysus mutters, and here's your fringe tidbit. In certain mystery cults, Dionysus was seen not as just a god of wine, but a divine mirror reflecting truth through inversion. He revealed through disguise, He revealed. Some initiates even believed that to know Dionysus fully, one had to become him at least for a night. Dionysus turns, locks eyes with the donkey. We did it, buddy. The donkey brays in response. One short, clear note that rings through the halls like a bell tolling for seriousness. And then it happens. A subtle shimmer in the sky, a flicker, a blink. And just above the amphitheater, a new cluster of stars glows into being. 2 ears, 1 snout, 1 very smug constellation. Donkey Minor. Dionysus declares, first of his name. The gods murmur, they nod. No one objects. The donkey is now, officially, kind of divine. You sit on the steps of Olympus, head spinning not from altitude, but from the realization that somehow, impossibly, a braying, snack-loving, grape-stealing creature has just been immortalized in the sky. And for once, even the gods look small. The night falls gently on Olympus, not with thunder or divine proclamations, just a soft hush, like velvet being drawn over the sky. The stars blink awake one by one, old constellations steady in their place, and the new one, Donkey Minor, shining ever so faintly. Just above the shoulder of Orion, Dionysus stretches out on a marble bench, arms behind his head, ankles crossed, looking more relaxed than any god should be after publicly handing over the heavens to a pack animal. Not bad for a comeback tour, he murmurs. The other gods have trickled away, back to their domains and dramas, already weaving their own interpretations of what happened. Some will call it performance art. Some will call it humiliation. Some, Zeus, probably will file it under things not worth questioning. You sit beside Dionysus in the quiet. Below you, the mortal world glows in little dots of firelight and dreams. You can almost hear the temples murmuring, the vineyards creaking, the theaters creaking open as priests and playwrights rewrite their verses to include a certain donkey with celestial ambitions. The donkey himself is here, too, chewing a cushion. Dionysus watches him fondly. He doesn't care about Olympus, he says. He doesn't care about status, or power, or whether Apollo's harp is tuned. You look at the stars, so why give him one? Because, Dionysus says, he reminded me that greatness isn't always in the show. Sometimes it's in the refusal to participate. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Constellations weren't fixed across cultures. While Greeks gave us the classical patterns Orion, Andromeda, Pegasus, other civilizations saw different things. A bear could be a canoe. A scorpion might be a drum. Stories shape the stars, not the other way around. Dionysus knows this. He's just playing with the script. A warm breeze blows through the colonnade. Somewhere far off, a satyr's flute echoes faintly through the night. Dionysus yawns. I suppose I should announce some new rituals, he says. Maybe a week-long festival in honor of braying, or a wine that smells like hay. You grin. And yet, he continues, mortals will turn it into a metaphor. They always do, even when we give them nonsense. They build meaning around it like ivy around a ruin. The donkey settles near your feet and closes his eyes, tail flicking once in dream. Dionysus nudges you. You know they're already writing tragedies about this. You laugh. It's not exactly tragic, no, but give them time. He says, smirking. Mortals are excellent at creating sorrow out of comedy. It's their favorite trick. Here's your fringe tidbit. In a little-known 1st century CE satirical play discovered in the ruins of Herculaneum, a donkey ascends Mount Olympus, defeats Dionysus in a musical contest, and is then cursed to speak only in riddles. Scholars disagree whether it was political parody, anti-religious satire, or just someone really bored during a wine shortage. Dionysus stands, stretches, and flicks a grape into the air. The donkey catches it mid-snore. Time to go, he says. You blink. Go where? He gestures broadly to the world below. Anywhere but here. And just like that, he's walking again down the gleaming steps of Olympus, sandals slapping against the marble. Thyrsus over one shoulder, hair catching the starlight like a halo made of mischief. You follow, so does the donkey. It feels like an ending. But with Dionysus, endings are just pauses between toasts. The night deepens, the stars shimmer, and behind you, the amphitheater echoes faintly with the memory of a bray so powerful it bent myth into laughter. You descend the mountain with the god and his donkey, the path winding through misty pine and marble ruins that no one's bothered to repair for several centuries. Dionysus whistles a strange little tune, half lullaby, half tavern song, with a few improvised lyrics about being defeated by a four-legged baritone with hooves. The donkey, ever humble, occasionally kicks a pebble with the air of a retired legend. Below, the land stretches in patchwork villages glowing with oil lamps, vineyards sleeping beneath their own leaves, temples wrapped in ivy. Everything is calm now. The kind of calm that only follows real chaos. The kind of calm that sticks. Mortals will write about this, Dionysus says casually. Hopping onto a low stone wall as you walk, they'll build little shrines, compose odd little hymns, maybe even create some awkward holiday around it. You smile. A donkey day. Why not? He shrugs. They've honored stranger things. Someone once built a temple around a rock that looked like Zeus's nose. Here's your mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greek religion, wine was heavily regulated. Even Dionysian festivals had rules timing, dilution ratios, proper vessels. And after the wild rites came the reckoning. Laws, reforms, and priesthoods to keep divine chaos tidy. Civilization always showed up with a mop. You pass a village on the edge of the woods. Quiet, serene. Somewhere, a dog barks once. A baby cries, then stops. Someone stirs a pot, not realizing a donkey god just strolled past their olive trees. Dionysus sighs. They'll write laws about wine tomorrow, he says. They always do after something goes right. You look at him. Wine laws. You ask. Oh, yes, he mutters. The ancient kind. No grapes harvested before a priest yawns 3 times. No fermentation near sacred goats. No toasting before dusk. Unless it's a Tuesday, that sort of thing. He makes a face. Just imagine what they'll say about the braying. Here's your fringe tidbit. In one Athenian suburb, a short-lived decree was passed after a Dionysian festival got out of hand, limiting public flute playing to no more than 2 hours past sunset, and banning masked animals in parades unless pre-approved by a local official. The law lasted a week. You wander into a field where amphorae are half buried. Forgotten after some long-ago festival, Dionysus picks one up, sniffs it, winces, and offers it to the donkey. The donkey takes one sniff and backs away like it's haunted. Fair, Dionysus says, setting it down gently. Some wine is meant to be forgotten. You sit together in the grass as moonlight pools in the folds of the land. The god, the beast, and the wanderer. It feels like a moment between centuries. Dionysus looks at you. Do you know why mortals make rules after joy? You shake your head. Because joy scares them. It opens too many doors, breaks too many walls. So they build fences. Call them tradition. Pretend the chaos never happened. You nod slowly. Will they forget this? You ask. He smiles. No, they'll remember it. But not how it felt. Just the outline. The facts. Maybe a song or two. The donkey will become a symbol. The rest will soften. You glance at the donkey. He's fallen asleep on his back. Legs twitching slightly. A bit of vine still tangled around his tail. They'll build a statue of him. Dionysus says with a grin. Probably heroic. Very serious. Bronze muscles. No hint of the flatulence. You laugh. A quiet one. It fits the night. And here comes the wine law. You can feel it creeping in on the heels of celebration. Somewhere, a scribe is already drafting regulations. Somewhere, a high priest is already designing an official ceremony that drains all the fun out of it. Dionysus rises. Come on, he says. Let's leave before they put my face on a coin and start selling bray-shaped incense. You follow him back into the woods, where the trees sigh softly, and the stars peek through like sleepy spectators. The donkey follows too, dream-walking behind you with the confidence of someone who will soon be misunderstood by an entire generation of poets. You glance back one last time at the field, and in the distance, you hear it, a soft bray. A farewell, or maybe a final warning. Not everything sacred needs a rulebook. The woods deepen around you. Leaves whisper overhead like gossiping mynods, and the moon spills silver across the forest floor, lighting the path in the broken patches. Dionysus leads with no particular urgency, stepping over roots and through brambles like someone walking through a memory. The donkey follows, vines still dragging behind him like a wedding train. No one speaks for a while. It's not the silence of awkwardness. It's the silence of something finishing itself. Eventually, Dionysus stops at a place where the trees open into a small clearing. In the middle, a single stone table, ancient and cracked, covered in moss. No fanfare, no torches, just the quiet sense that this place has waited patiently for your arrival. This, he says softly, is where it ends. You raise an eyebrow. The story. No, he says, just the part where I pretend I'm not affected. He sits on the stone, pulls out a flask, offers it to you. The wine tastes familiar now, still wild, still warm, but softer, less like chaos, more like understanding. You sit beside him. The donkey curls up on the far side, sighing into the grass. I wasn't always like this, Dionysus murmurs. Once I was angry, loud. They called it divine madness. But I was just trying to be heard. You glance over. He's not being dramatic. Not this time. They didn't want me on Olympus, he says. Said I was too wild, too foreign, too unpredictable. But what they really meant was too honest. I showed them things they didn't want to see. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Dionysus was unique among the Olympians, born of a mortal woman, worshipped in the East before being accepted in the West, associated with transformation, identity, and erasing boundaries between gods and mortals, men and women, life and death. They only welcomed me. Dionysus continues. After they realized I brought more than wine, I brought forgetting and forgiving. The donkey snores, a leaf falls into your lap, you don't move it. And here's your fringe tidbit. In certain rural villages in ancient Greece, Dionysus wasn't just worshipped, he was played. One villager, often the quietest, would become him for a day, wearing the ivy, speaking in riddles, and reminding others that gods don't always arrive with thunder. They arrive with questions. Dionysus leans back on his elbows. You know what I've realized? What? That nothing lasts except the way a story makes you feel. The facts, those get rewritten. But the bray that made a god laugh, that stays. You lie down in the grass. The stars are thick above you now. Donkey miner shimmering quietly, a new symbol that will soon be misunderstood, misquoted, and memorialized in ways that strip it of every ridiculous, beautiful, absurd detail. And that's okay, because you remember. Will they still talk about you? You ask. He smiles. They always do, whether I want them to or not. You close your eyes. A soft wind moves through the trees. A low, contented bray hums in the background. And Dionysus whispers, now sleep. Little mythmaker, the madness is done for now. The night folds around you like a blanket. The forest, once so full of music and motion, now rests. Even the wind quiets its rustle. The stars above blink slowly. as if growing heavy with their own stories. The donkey, now just a creature again, no crown, no performance, breathes in slow, deep waves beside you. You feel that breath. You feel the weight of the day exhale from your shoulders. Dionysus doesn't speak anymore. He just sits there, watching the embers of his legend cool into something softer, something truer. A god who laughed, a god who lost, a god who found humility in a bray and let it echo through the heavens. And you, gentle traveler, were there to witness it. Let that stay with you. Let the nonsense soothe you. Let the absurdity remind you that not everything needs to make sense to matter. That sometimes the most sacred thing in the world is a moment that no one else would have believed except you. So, drift now. Let your thoughts dissolve like wine into earth. Let your breath slow like a donkey at rest. Let the vines close in, not to trap you, but to hold you, gently, until morning. You are safe here. In story, you are soft here. In silence, you are home here. In myth, sleep well, and let the stars break quietly above you, ever watching, ever laughing.